Thank you for sharing your time and expertise. First, I'd like to express our appreciation for Amanda Helgemoe. I believe this is her fourth session with the classic community in July. At this point, I'm pretty sure we have enough video footage to do a Best of Amanda series on YouTube. So Amanda is the president and CEO of New Vista Event Management Services, a logistics and labor company. In addition to her full-time job, Amanda serves on the board of directors for the Experiential Designers and Producers Association, and she is the past president of E2MA. She's also an active member of the Healthcare Convention and Exhibitors Association and a frequent speaker at Exhibitor Live. No one in our industry is more passionate about exhibitor advocacy than Amanda. For years, I've been amazed by her ability to combine research with common sense and her talent for bringing everyone to the table to discuss this important topic, despite all the landmines and the 800-pound gorillas. Amanda is going to share where we are now and how we got here and what's possible. This will be primarily a Q&A session, so you are encouraged to ask questions or comment at any point. All right, Amanda, it's all yours.
Well, thanks for that great introduction. I appreciate it. I'll have to get that script from you too, Mel. I loved it. I need to hire Mel to be my PR person, I think. But anyway, thank you. And I'm super excited today. I also see a lot of members of our advocacy group on the phone. I see Hector Garcia, Sue Huff, Dominique, and Cindy. I hope I don't know if there's anybody else on, but thank you guys for joining. So they'll be, it'll be great to have that back up today. Our exhibitor advocacy group, I think we've been here, and Sue can correct me if I'm wrong, I think we've been together over 15 years. I was actually invited into the group after they formed, so they may have been together for at least 20. Over the years, we've had some people come and go. Cindy Parsons is one of, with Tyler Technologies, is one of our most recent people to join the group. So it's been really great to be involved with this group because we have brands that are represented from all different industries. So, you know, the data that we compile, you know, we feel really good about it because it's coming from a lot of different industries. So that's been really helpful over the years. You know, ultimately, our main goal has just been to bring the exhibitor voice forward. Because a lot of you on this phone probably remember, you know, we were all back in the day would attend TS2 every summer. And, you know, basically that was the last place where exhibitors really had a forum to talk about their pain points and try to bring those pain points forward to express to organizers and associations what they really needed and wanted. Since that the dissolution of TS2, you know, it's left a pretty big gap. So I've been fortunate enough to be part of this group. We, you know, my company, and Harold asked this question last week, which I thought was great. He's like, how does a labor president and owner of a labor company, you know, get involved with this type of topic? And I said, well, I came from corporate America before I started my company. So I had a very good understanding of trade shows and sales. And it was just really, when I came into this industry 22 years ago, I just didn't understand why the people paying the bill were not, you know, why they were the customer and why they were not treated like a customer. And what I realized was that the attendees were really what the association's organizers viewed as the real customer. So that's why we've had, you know, a lot of debate over the years and the need to really come together and express to these organizers and associations that the exhibitors are just as much the customer as the attendee. That's kind of where we are today. I just want to give that a little bit of that background. And I'm just looking at the list here to see if anybody else joined us. But we have over, I think we're up to 12 brands represented now in the group. And then we just have, I'm one of the few suppliers. It's myself, Trade Show Logic, which is a very progressive general contractor, and we're fortunate to have them in the group. Gwen Hill with Exhibitor Force is also in our group because of the time that she spent over the years with EDPA, and she's also been very, very passionate. And then the last person in our group that most of you may find interesting and different is the head of the Carpenters Union, Kevin McLaughlin. He also joins us in our group, and he brings tremendous knowledge and insight and is very helpful, especially as it relates to the pricing model. Because I'm sure most of you on the phone are not surprised to know that the union typically takes the beating and the brunt of that conversation when the rates are real high. And we can assure you that it's really not just the union in our industry. And if the union tends to pace, their wage increases tend to pace with the consumer price index, which is a really good gauge. Yet these rates that we've been tracking since 1999 through our group have far exceeded to the tune of 3, 4, 500% of increases that the union has been putting out. That's another interesting piece of information to share. So I'll stop there, Mel, and I'll let you see the conversation. I just want to give a little background.
Well, I think the one thing that I want to ask you, Amanda, is why now? Why do you feel like there's momentum and there's a chance to make significant changes? Because, you know, as someone who's been in this industry for 20 years, even 20 years ago, I thought this is crazy. This is an idiotic model, and I never really understood why exhibitors put up with it. So why do you think that there's an opportunity to make change now?
Well, I think just, simply, I mean, the pandemic, I think, now that exhibitors are faced with, having to balance their new situation, that being, digital and being forced in a situation where they had to think about how they were going to bring their products to market. They didn't have the live events for over a year, and so they've had to put money into virtual and digital. And now that we're coming out of the pandemic, they're being told, most of them in our group and many others that have been surveyed, that their budgets are not going to go up. So how are they going to how are they going to choose what shows to go to? How is the money going to flow? So I think that's the reason why organizers and associations, in my mind and our mind, for the first time, are really listening to the exhibitors, because they know they're not going to have the same amount of money to allocate to live events.
You, you made a comment in one of the sessions last week, the difference between private organizers, for-profit organizers, and nonprofit organizers, and their degree of, I guess, sophistication and knowledge about what's happening with the GC. Would you mind expanding on that? I thought that was very revealing.
Sure. We encourage everyone to take a look at their show schedules and separate them, put them in two buckets, put them in the association, the nonprofit bucket, and then the for-profit shows in a different bucket. And the reason is because the association is owned by their members. So if, Medtronic is going to a show that is an association run show, they have to listen to their members. They have to do what their members are asking them to do. If it's a for-profit show, they can do whatever they want. And if their show's declining or there are problems with their show, essentially it's their problem. I mean, the show may or may not survive, right? So there's a huge difference in the mentality and the attitude towards the exhibitor between the nonprofit and the for-profit. Does that make sense now? To explain that properly?
It does, but I think one of the comments you made is how the association often interacts with the GC as far as their depth of knowledge of what the GC can provide them, as opposed to the for-profit, which really they understand every little nuance of what's the financial model is very clear to them, but sometimes with the association it's not clear.
Correct. So I'll expand on that. Yes. So the sophistication level with the for-profits tend to be higher. They are very intimate with the numbers, so to speak. So they really understand exactly where all the dollars are coming from and going out. Whereas associations tend to just trust their general services contractor and kind of are guided by and led by their general services contractor. So the dynamic in the relationship tends to be very different. The organizers, let's say, perhaps maybe a bit more skeptical and perhaps have more auditing, whereas the associations just say, okay. And, if you look at the numbers, the association is negotiating over 60% of the costs on behalf of their exhibitors. So they really need to have the same level of understanding of the numbers to make sure that their exhibitors are getting fair market pricing. And it just tends to not be the case for various reasons. You're on mute, Mel.
Can't hear you, Mel.
About that. Okay, like I said, I don't want to dominate the questions. I just want to ask one more and then I'll be quiet, I promise. Is I really want to hear from some of the folks here that you've invited, Amanda, the exhibit managers. What are they doing? How do they interact with the show organizer, the GSC, to make a difference? I mean, how are they doing it that as far as the rest of us can assist them and can advise our clients to do much the same thing?
I think we should call on Sue Huff. Her company just wrote an article about this and it was published in Exhibitor Live. So I'll let her talk a little bit about it, and also maybe we can point everybody on the phone to that article. It was a great article.
Yeah, so I would say the first thing the exhibitors need to do is keep accurate records. They need to track the increases in cost over time. And so that's a starting point. That's where you can start to have a conversation with the show organizers and share the data. And on the association side, it's a little more difficult because a lot of those shows seem to move from city to city. But you can start tracking what the difference is, because they may go back to that same city over time, 3 years later, whatever. And to track that increase according to what the increases are in the CPI, for inflation rate, for example. And then to also look at what other shows rates are in that specific city, because that's a good comparison as well to the show organizer to say, well, we had a situation where we had the same show in the same city, same convention center, different general service contractor, I think. I have to go back to my notes. But basically, 6 months later, it was 180% increase in drayage, in electric, in a number of things. And so having that conversation, not accusing the show organizer of anything, but helping to make them understand what it is that they have the power to negotiate. First of all, a lot of them don't understand that they have that power. They think that those are the labor rates coming in and they have to accept them. So they need to understand that it is not that, and that they have the power to negotiate, and they're negotiating on behalf of the exhibitors.
How was that received when you made those comments?
Well, the one with its 180% more, they went back to their general service contractor and had some questions. And what they did is they came back and reduced all costs, all show service costs, 15% across the board. That was a nice gesture, but it was still 180% more. So but it was pretty late in the process. It was only 2 weeks before the show where they made that change. Some shows, like Amanda said, the article in Exhibitor Magazine, it's a really good one. I would encourage you to read it. It was done by a colleague of mine at Medtronic, and I've since retired, by the way, just to put that out there. But it was a conversation we had with the show organizers, and they ended up also surveying their members because their show was declining. And so they ended up moving the show dates, which helped the membership, which helped the exhibitors not set up on overtime. So really it was a win-win. They were able to reduce the registration fee for their attendees. Our costs went down. And so really it was a win-win. So it's having that conversation and building trust first with the show organizer, not just going in and, to be a complaining session, but it's really first trying to build that relationship and then having a discussion, because at the end of the day, we want the show to succeed, and they do as well. And in order for it to succeed, the exhibitors have to be there.
not an auto tab. There's going to be buttons. So you can put a
Hey,
button.
I don't know if Mel is trying to talk. You're on, there you go.
Yes, that's okay. We're opening this up. Did anybody have questions for Amanda or anybody else in the group on this topic?
I would also suggest, because I know a lot of people on the call, we have varying sizes of programs and footprints in the hall. And one of the comments that we get often from organized associations, well, these are the bigger exhibitors. Medtronic has the large footprint, and I know that they have various size footprints at different shows, but really just going across the aisle and talking to the person, if you're a smaller exhibitor and you have these concerns, is just, grabbing a couple people. You'd be surprised that, we haven't found many people who are not willing to talk about it and collaborate and go in, if they're a little leery about having the meeting themselves, go in together, go in with 2, 4, 5, 6 people that are exhibiting at the hall. That's also very effective when you're trying to approach or figure out an approach with the conversation or a meeting.
So Amanda, can you share some models that are successful right now, that are having some traction in the industry?
Yeah, and I'm not even familiar with all of them. I know a lot has changed during the pandemic. We've had a lot of players, change in certain shows. So I think we're all going to be seeing and learning this as we come out of it. But we talked a lot about the National Association of Broadcasters right before COVID, because they actually drastically changed their pricing model in 2019. And they also had it slotted to do again in 2020 because it was so successful in 2019. This was a show that was really just in the early stages of their show floor declining. It really had not started declining drastically, but they had been listening and hearing from many of their exhibitors that they were going to decline. They were going to take much smaller space. And so they really were proactive, hired a consultant, got in front of them. It took them, I think, about 18 months to figure out what they needed to do so that they didn't lose money as an association. And people are just, they can't believe the result. And the result was that exhibitors saved on average 40% on their show services, which is a significant number. The only negative that they received from this model, where they went from charging, drayage by the hundredweight, they took it and they put it to the booth space fee. So it was a flat rate. They could bring as much stuff in as they wanted, and it was a flat rate based on your booth size. Initially, the 10 by 10 exhibitors were a little concerned because they were going to have to pay, it was, I think on average, $385 more. And so they were a little concerned about that. And on the surface, it looked like their costs were going to go up. But then they realized they didn't have to do all these crazy things that they had been doing in the past, where they were trying to sneak things into the hall so that they didn't have to go through the dock, because they felt like, they knew they were going to get dinged with special handling charges. So once they realized they didn't have to, send things through the hotel room, try and figure out how to get it from their hotel room onto the show floor, they didn't have to try to sneak things on their luggage cart, from their car to the floor. Overall, they ended up being very satisfied. So that was really the only negative. And from an exhibitor standpoint, the concern from the association standpoint was they were very concerned that they were going to lose money. Like they would, by changing this model, they felt like they were taking a significant risk. And that is not at all what happened. And so you ended up with a situation where you had both parties very happy. And the other thing from this survey that came out of NAB was that the customer service level actually went up. It did not go down. Because everyone said, well, if you're going to decrease our prices by that much, well, then surely you're going to have to cut somewhere, and our customer service is going to suffer. And actually what happened was the customer service went up. So again, that just shows you, if the association and organizers are willing to do their due diligence, and they're truly going to get in there and really understand where their general services contractors' costs are, right? So they pay the general service contractor for everything they ask them to do instead of asking for free things. That there is a model out there that can be extremely profitable and can create a win-win for both the exhibitor and the organizer. So that's one example. I've heard of several other large shows everyone's going to see coming out of this. They have changed their model and they're going to new model. I don't know what the percentages are yet. Our group's hope is that this will become a trend, but it's too soon to tell where this is going to go and if that model would take off for many of the other shows.
So if there's resistance, where is resistance coming from?
The general service contractor. I mean, you know, and I mean, both the organizer and the general service contractor, because, you know, they've been getting significant rebates, a lot of freebies. You know, it comes down to transparency. You know, we're at a point in our industry where transparency is being forced down their throat. And so, you know, they're just going to have to realize that we're now in a time where, you know, fair market pricing is happening. Perhaps fair profits are going to start happening. So it's just, you know, there's a lot of resistance on both sides. But, you know, if you're the organizer association and your show's declining and you know your floor is going to shrink, you have to do something. So we'll see where it takes us, where we go with it.
Amanda, I have a question. The vast majority of the people on this call are exhibit houses. What is something, or what are things that we as exhibit houses can do to support the exhibitors? I mean, we design, we build, we ship, but are there specific things we can do that would help?
Yeah, you know, I think that, you know, you and us, we're in a position, you know, where a lot of us are ordering, you know, all the services for our clients. So we're just encouraging people to just take it one step further and really, you know, you can call it what you want, if you call it auditing or, you know, I personally think you need to be more proactive and try and get in front of it. So you're not doing a post-show audit, right? You bring it into your services package on the front end to make sure that everything's being ordered properly. And when you do see a huge discrepancy or a huge price spike or increase, you know, we need to help them have these conversations with the organizers and the associations, just like mentioned. We've got to get in front of this and we've got to just, you know, in many cases, Harold, it's as simple as picking up the phone and having the conversation.
Yeah.
A lot of times, you know, we're just accepting, right? Our exhibitors are so busy that they're like kind of throwing their arms up and just accepting it. It's really can be, and a lot of times as simple as having the conversation, starting the conversation. You might not get the results you want immediately for that show, but like Sue said, I mean, every time this has happened, there have been changes made, and for sure the following year, you should see some results. Vista, the way we handle it and the way that we train our people on site is we tell them, you need to handle this, these issues need to be handled on site. Don't wait until the show's over. It's much harder to get a resolution. You have to work a lot harder. It takes a lot more time. So, you know, really just manage it from start, you know, through install, through the show to the end, and try not to let things, you know, pile up. So at the end of the show, you're going to have a lot of, you know, your clients are going to have a lot of surprises. And, you know, that's the thing that I tell people, you know, nobody wants that phone call from the client when they get that invoice that's double. Because I can assure you that you guys are going to take the hit. You know, the organizers and the generals, they have their cards on file. They've already been processed, right? We're all sending invoices out. So it's something that's very effective, and I would encourage everybody to take, you know, a role in that. I see somebody's hand is up, Harold. Looks like Max's hand is up.
Yep.
Amanda, where have you found, in what capacities have you found leverage that is negotiable?
In all. So what most of our exhibitors don't understand is that they should not be having the conversation. Now, if they want to start by having a conversation with a general, that's fine. More times than not, they're going to be told no. When you go straight to the organizers association's office and you have that conversation there, that's where you get results. Like I said, 100% of the time, it is in their best interest to help their exhibitors. So that's what I suggest. People, they just don't think that they have access. For some reason, I don't understand why. It's just the way our industry has evolved over time. You know, there's been this big wall that has gone up between the exhibitor and the organizer, and that the general contractors have been very effective at that, and it's worked.
So what
Yeah.
you're suggesting is the association rep?
The association rep, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. I could give you, it would take up to, I could give you 100 examples just in the last 5 years of that very scenario. And it's very effective. I think Sue wanted to say something too, or to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, back to the question about what can exhibit houses do. Well, you all see what the rates are for all different types of shows going into, different cities. And what you could do is help your exhibitors in compiling that data and providing that to them and having a discussion with your exhibit managers about how they can approach the association and to share some of those rates, because it's really eye-opening to the associations, the show organizers, when they start seeing rates that other shows are getting in the same city, because they just simply don't know. And I had a conversation with one exhibit or with one organizer, and what had happened was the drayage rates went way up one year. Well, the next year, what we did is we decreased our booth space, and the drayage rates didn't go down. So we still ended up, our drayage rates were basically flat the second year. But what it did is it decreased the revenue for the show organizer because we decreased our space. We're trying to manage our costs, within not increasing our cost. And so who was losing was the show organizer, because their space revenue went down. So it's really trying to help the exhibitors in coming up with that story.
Yeah, and I would say, I co-present with Sue quite a bit, and I would say it's pretty rare that you have someone like Sue who tracks all of that. She takes it upon herself and her team. They track all those numbers. And back to what can exhibit houses do? You guys have all those show kits. You're ordering those services. We just track all the data, so we have it at our fingertips. When a customer calls, we know exactly what they were paying year prior, 5 years prior, same show, same city, same. So, I would say just assembling and organizing the data for your exhibitors would be extremely helpful.
Mr. Falberg, did you have a question?
Well, I put it in the chat there. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I was going to ask Sue Huff or any of the other exhibit managers on the call, how do you feel about losing TSCA, the Trade Show Exhibitors Association, as an advocacy group for you? And is there a value to reorganize trade show exhibitors, and how would we go about doing that?
Well, EDPA, stepped up in supporting the advocacy group that has been pulled together. It's not the broad TSCA group that was really a group of exhibit managers. I mean, there is a hole there, I would say, in that there isn't a true association for exhibit managers. There isn't in healthcare, but there really isn't in the other industries. So that is, the exhibit managers don't really have a huge voice in the industry, I'd say.
I'd
Dominic,
second that.
yeah, Dominic, I see you shaking your head. Would you comment on it?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty involved with the group when it first started, or probably within a year of it starting through TSCA. And it was, like Sue said, and Sue joined also while it was part of TSCA. It really was a great avenue for us as exhibit managers to have somebody that can support us and can represent us if there was an issue. At the time, we were more of a anonymous group of individuals versus being known to the industry as to who was involved with the group. And I think, like, I agree with Sue. There is a gap and there is a void that, excuse me, we have. Now, I mean, I think what EDPA is providing is great, but it's not the exhibitor managers. There is a gap there, I think. It would be great to have something like that again, but I think even I was involved with the time when we dissolved it or when it was voted to be dissolved, and I think it would take a lot of effort to get something reestablished to that level again. And I watched it decline very quickly once I joined it. So I don't know what the right answer is, but at the same time, I think there is a gap.
Brad,
Did we talk in detail on this call? I might have missed it, of what EDPA is going to try to do to help out exhibitors. I'm sorry if I'm being redundant. Did we go into any detail on that, Amanda?
No, we didn't, Brad, and I was just going to add to what Dominique said. So it is being discussed and thrown around at the executive committee level right now through EDPA because of what we've all been dealing with through the pandemic. Our main focus initially was on industry advocacy, which is, the group is doing a great job with. Now that we're coming out of it, Brad, I think it's going to be back on the table, and we'll be taking it to the extended board. I've already polled our group, and everyone has expressed, like Dominique said, interest. It's just, I think the group and exhibitors are probably waiting for us now to put some sort of proposal in front of them as to how we could organize this. So it's back on the table.
Dominique, why do you think TSCA dissolved so quickly, as you just commented?
I know more than I probably can divulge at this point, but I know a lot of it had to do with financial.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't want to say something that inappropriate, so I'm going to just leave it at that.
No, and I can probably say, because I know I have somewhat of an inside look too, that's fair to share for the public. Yeah, I don't think the exhibitors wanted it to dissolve. The exhibitors, wanted it to keep going. It was strictly on the association management side of things and how the finances and how it was running. And they just could not keep it going. So that's why E2MA, if you guys recall that name, started. The idea initially was to take the Exhibitor Appointed Contractors Association, which I'm a member of, is made up of labor companies and a lot of other suppliers, and take TS2 and merge them. And it was just a huge undertaking. And I don't think it was anyone's fault. I think the vision was spot on, Brad, and it's exactly what I think the industry needed. The execution just didn't happen. And we realized that, again, it was from a financial perspective and not having those resources to make it happen. So the ACA stayed, the E2MA dissolved as well. And then the EACA came back to the forefront. So yeah, I think EDPA has it would make sense to try to figure something out. And we just need to make sure we make it a priority over the next few months.
Amanda, as a board member from the Midwest, I would agree with you insofar as that we need to take I guess, a firmer role in being an advocacy group for negotiating. And I think that we have the leverage to be able to do that, and we simply haven't taken advantage of it as much as we should. When you're dealing with the associations in and of themselves, how, like, for instance, when you're negotiating, does that become an across the board negotiation, or is that on an individual basis?
Well, both. So it depends on when you're negotiating, right, or when you're having. So if it's obviously if the show's running, my recommendation is just to help your client, get through the show and negotiate on their behalf and make sure they're getting accurate, fair pricing, because the price, everything's been set in stone. I would though be armed with information and the data and ask the best time to have that meeting to prepare for the following years, right at, shortly after that show ends. So that's how we do it, or what I recommend. Sue has her hand up. Go ahead, Matt.
Well, I'm sorry, and I only bring this up because obviously the NPE show is a great example of exactly what the association did to, in my opinion, probably just keep its solvency, for 3 years and be able to pay its directors over that period of time. And by keeping, half of the deposit from everyone from the show, I think that was disingenuous to the industry and the association as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're all, they're all, I think Doug Duquette was here years ago, said it best. He said, this is just cottage industry. We have every show is doing something different. There's no standard, there's no norm, so unfortunately, again, it just creates another challenge for our customers and exhibitors because we have to look at every show differently and treat each scenario differently. So.
Sue, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if I can continue that question real quickly, do you see or foresee that some of the larger associations will split this down into smaller shows for that very reason, and probably do more regional shows than they will national or internationals?
I I just got off a call. I can't remember which one. I've been on so many in the last 3 weeks, but I don't know that they're seeing any trend there. I think we all thought early in the pandemic that that's where it would go, to taking these big shows and breaking them down into smaller. I don't know that we're seeing that become a trend. I don't know if anybody else on the phone has seen any statistics on that, but I don't know that that's going to happen.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for interrupting, Sue.
Actually, my hand got up somehow. I don't know how. Sorry.
Hey,
Just
Amanda,
hitting buttons, keyboard.
Amanda, historically, I'm kind of curious, how did labor become the costing boogeyman in trade shows over the years? It just seems kind of grossly unfair, and yet everyone points a finger at them.
Yeah, I think it's just because, union, when people hear union, right, it's always historically been a dirty word. I'm from Flint, Michigan, and it's probably one of a few cities in the country where you can pretty much say there's union everywhere. I've seen a lot, but I will tell you, I think it's just, they were the easiest one to call out and be the fall guy. And the other reason is because typically you don't have any of the union members at the table when these negotiations are happening. And my eyes were open wide when I found out and learned how NAB did it. And NAB's consultant told them, you need to invite the head of the union to the table right now and be part of these conversations because you are going to be shocked when you see their percent increases year over year compared to what you've been told you're supposed to increase. So I think it's just they just have never had a seat at the table. And again, I encourage all associations and organizers to invite them in. They need to understand need to understand the real data. They're just not getting good data, and that's how this has happened.
So, do you see an avenue for the advocacy of the industry to be able to negotiate with the associations being stronger or even perhaps less than the associations themselves with their individual clients? And the reason I ask that again is that as you had mentioned, there's prevailing rates and those are set by the associations and they can vary wildly based on the show for a given location. But we all have to, I guess, realize at the end of the day too that the associations are profit centers in and of themselves, which need to maintain. They're there to subsist.
Right. We have data, we've compiled the data and we keep it current. And 100% of the time when they ask us for it, we give it to them. We're posting it now. We're keeping archives now on the EDPA website. So yeah, I mean, we're constantly calling on them and asking them to look at the data. And again, it kind of goes back to the basics. You all, and I think most of the exhibitors think they're looking at it. They're not looking at it. And so I think just having a place where, and or does it even exist, right? Where do you find it, right? A lot of them don't even where is the data, right? I think, can't remember if it was Trade Show Executive or which organization published an annual report showing all of those increases. And they were just, when TS2 went away, they went away with it. And then the EDPA in 2017, I think, reenacted and started, we started putting that study back together. So it's hard to find in our industry. And so I think that the advocacy group, again, we're hoping that they call upon us a lot in the future. And as again, it's just, we have it now. We're willing to share it. We want to share it, and we need them to take a hard look at it and make sure that they are, properly negotiating on behalf of their exhibitors.
So, having that historical data, do you think that that's something that we need to, as the EDPA, need to negotiate regionally or nationally or both?
I mean, we have really strengthened our relationship with the head of IAE, David Dubois, the executive director. And since he is taking over as executive director, I'm not sure how many years he's been in that seat. It may be approaching 10, I want to say. But our relationship with them is really strengthened. And that has really helped because they have recently put I know Sue and she was on a panel at their annual meeting. They try to reach as many organizers and associations as they could at their annual meeting. They shared the NAB model. They gave the case study. They shared the case study with their members. So yeah, we're trying to reach, we're trying to reach their associations at that high level, and then as many times as necessary, as often, we also will meet with them individually.
Thank you.
Amanda, would you
And,
mind sharing the story?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just real quick, Amanda, would you mind sharing the story that you shared last week at one of the groups about one of your clients, I believe it's Ford, and the little bit of the shell game that's going on regarding the pretense of fair prices that's not really fair prices?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's another watch out thing that we have to watch out for. I got a phone call from Ford, one of our clients for the SEMA show. It's an aftermarket car show, Las Vegas, happens in November. And they were pretty up in arms because on the surface, when they received the show kit, it appeared that they were going to be able to really, put their budgets together in a much easier manner, and should also see some cost savings as it related to some of the big bucket items like exclusive services. They were talking about how they had eliminated all special handling charges and, the 33 or 37 different ways that you could get charged for special handling with this one rate. Well, unfortunately, they had the same booth properties as they did in 2019, and they noticed that essentially all they did was double the base rate of the drayage rate. So they're and this is a company that pays a significant amount of money for drayage. So I would just caution you to, when you see some of these things on the the front page of your show kit, oh, look how we made it so much easier for you. You still have to do the math and put it together and explain to them, well, you really haven't helped us. You've just doubled our base rate. And I think Sue did that with one of their shows, and they had the same experience with a couple of their shows right before COVID, where they were saying, we've gone to this much easier, way to budget and put your budget in it. Ultimately, at the end of the day, they were going to end up paying the same, if not more. So unfortunately, we're just watching it, and we're just cautioning people and asking them, again, asking the associations and the organizers to make sure that they really understand what the costs are. Let's not just fall into this trap of, well, it's essentially just a marketing gimmick.
And the other thing the association needs to understand is when they do that, when they double the rate, the nice thing is the exhibitors can plan ahead of time because it's a fixed rate. They understand, but what's going to happen from the organizer side is exhibitors now know what their costs are going to be, and they may just cut their space in half.
Yeah.
which impacts their revenue. So they just need to understand how it will impact them.
Brad,
Wasn't it on this call that we had the GES vice president come up and say, oh, we're really improving things for the exhibitors moving forward. Now, it's not going to cost anything less, but we're really going to improve it for them. And I remember rolling my eyes, but wasn't on this call, Harold?
Yes,
Tom?
yes, yes.
Brad, you're absolutely right. And the unfortunate part about it is that the doing this under the auspices of simplicity costs us all more. Period. At the end of the day, because it's no different than insurance rates. At the end of the day, they know what they want in terms of their bottom dollar, and so streamlining billing does not necessarily mean less expensive for anybody.
Well, the exhibitors want predictability, right? And transparency. So the GES goes, okay, we'll make it predictable, but it's no more transparent. That's for sure.
Right.
It's the same cost,
Right.
Amanda, I'm going to ask you what I called up the magic wand question. And I'm going to ask you first, and then any of the other exhibit managers that want to give it a shot, please feel free. But if you could wave a wand and make one change to the way work is currently flowing through the system, what would you change first?
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, what I ask is that the associations and organizers really understand their costs, the costs of their customer, the general contractor. Across the board, I would say majority of the time, they absolutely have no idea. They have no idea. They don't know what the numbers are. They're just trusting a person, a company, and we're saying, you got to stop doing that. If you want to create transparency that every exhibitor is asking for, this is how you start. You have to do a full audit, and you have to have the union at the table, and you have to have a full understanding of what the costs really are and what the costs are of the free items that you want. You just have to get rid of this free thing and start paying for things and have a full understanding of what the cost structure is.
Thanks. How about any of the exhibit managers? You want to take a whack at that?
Hey, this is Don Jalbert at Exhibit Associates here in Kansas City, and I think that's a great question, Harold. And the reason I think that, because my magic wand would be the associations to schedule away from each other. So if you're in a like-minded industry, let's say transportation, and I'll use ACT Expo in Long Beach that's going on in early September, late August, early September, is followed by IANA, which is a week later, in the same area in Long Beach at the same convention center. So it's basically the same industry in the same convention center 2 weeks apart. So our customer is going to be at both. It's seamless, but they're going to get the same crowd. They're going to get the exact same crowd at both. Well, there's going to be overlap. So my one magic wand is have the associations talk to each other and spread their shows out.
Yeah, track each other for sure. That would be a big help.
It
Yep.
doesn't always mean that it solves the problem though, because I have shows that overlap every year that are in the same industry. And it's tough because one of them is a national show, so it moves around all over the country, maybe on the West Coast one year, and then it's easy because the other show's on the West Coast, but half the time it's in the Midwest or the East Coast or the Southeast. And we're talking serious expenses, or we have to have duplication of display items in order to be able to showcase well at both shows, and both shows historically are two of our stronger summer related shows. So it doesn't make it any easier. And it's also challenging because the GSC is the same for both shows. So they try to quote unquote help us if we're wanting and do a caravan to get display, exhibit pieces from one part of the country to the other part of the country. But when you're dealing with the product that I deal with, which is windows and doors, not that easy to move that fast. So it's a different challenge then.
Amanda, I apologize if you had mentioned this earlier, but where is this information as far as the association is concerned collectively resourced that we could access it? Because obviously this is something that we have to look at, we have to be forward thinking and negotiating it for the future, not necessarily the present.
Yeah, it's on, so the EDPA created a new tab on their website. It's edpa.com/exhibitor advocacy. And if you click on it, there's an industry advocacy and then an exhibitor advocacy. That's where we're storing now, and we're keeping. And the white paper is there. There are a couple of surveys that came out that are awesome pieces of information. I mean, we're just trying to keep it all in one place on that website. If you have, or anybody on this call has any trouble finding anything, you need a specific document, you can just shoot me an email. I'm happy. I have all this stuff on my desktop. I can get it over to you. So I'm
Thank
happy
you.
to just.
All right. Yeah, Amanda, as we're coming to a close, I'm going to throw a Molotov cocktail out there, and you know where I'm going with this. All right. Exhibitor Live. How do we get them to be a leader instead of a passive follower in our industry?
Well, I give them, so I have a good relationship with Randy Acker. I know Lee Knight very well. I know all the players. I think a lot of you on the phone probably know all the players well. I'll start with this. I'm encouraged. Randy Acker for the first time, and it was supposed to happen in 2020. We all know what happened that show. But for the first time, they asked our group to come and present in their town hall area at their show. Up until that point in time, they were leery of having these conversations and exhibitor advocacy discussed. So they have opened the door, and we're encouraged by that. And some of the other ideas that they're tossing around and they're going to put in their shows in the future. So as far as the conversation, the topics, that they are now allowing at their show, I'm encouraged by that. On the other hand, as it relates to the pricing model and, what we're all asking for as exhibitors, they have not, agreed to change their model. We've asked. I've encouraged everybody on every call to ask Randy to take a hard look at that, and something we would like to set the tone and be the leaders and have Exhibitor Live. We're a trade show for trade shows. I mean, let's do it there. I will tell you, since our last week conversation, a big shout out to Rob Cohen. I don't think he's on the phone today. He sent a letter, an email to Randy, mapping all of that out for Randy. So I just encourage everybody that exhibits at that show to send him an email and say, this is what we want, this is what we expect, and we want to take a lead here and set the example so that our exhibitors can use that for their shows as well. Yeah, reach out. Again, it goes back to having the conversation. A lot of times people just don't have they don't ask, right? So if you don't ask, it's not going to happen. Brad exhibits at that show, so I'd love to hear your response to that.
Well, what I was going to say is that I've had this conversation with Randy as well. Exhibitor Magazine's a for-profit organization, and they have chosen not to be political. They have a lot of people that help pay for them that have competing interests, and so there's a reason. I do think that opening up Exhibitor Live to allow the conversations to happen is different than taking lead in being, an advocate for the industry. So, being a conduit is different than taking a lead, I think. So it's a good change that they're opening their door up at the show.
Great.
Anybody have any final questions for Amanda? This is your last chance. Tess?
Amanda, I just wanted to say hi. My company has been a client of yours for years and years. So I'm shouting out to Matthew Little and Bill Russell and
Thank
Josh
you.
Stubblefield. I love those guys. Unfortunately, the people they set up for me are hiding all their stuff's in my warehouse, and they are going nowhere. They were a little angry at the end of some of the last season in 2019 about how the costs were up so high.
Yeah.
So if I had a magic wand, vacuuming a 20 by 40 booth wouldn't cost $375.
That's right. I like it. I like it. Just ask. I mean, just ask. Just have the conversation. I mean, you can always be told no. I'm sure. I'm used to
Thanks for your leadership, Amanda. You're a saint in the industry, by the way.
Oh, no, good. very kind of you to say it's part self-serving. I'm just trying to satisfy my clients. I don't, it's no fun to have angry clients all the time, even though you're not 100% or directly responsible for it. We're just trying to make it a better environment across the board. We want you guys to keep exhibiting. We want our live events. We all, right? We all
It's self-serving.
It is stuff like, how long did we have to hang out for to bring this back? We're going on 16 months, 17 months. It's been a tough road. So I'm super hopeful that, we're going to see a lot of change coming out of this.
Amanda, thank you very much for your time today, and especially thank you for your expertise and for everything that you do in the industry. You're a beacon of hope, and we need that right now.
Good. Well, it's great to see everybody. Thank you for being on the call. Thank you, Classic.